The world had never seen anything like this. It all started quietly, with no warning, no signs of an impending disaster. Earth's satellites, the ones that constantly monitored the vast emptiness of space, suddenly began to pick up strange, incomprehensible signals from a distant part of the galaxy. At first, the scientists thought it was just another glitch, something trivial to dismiss. But as the signals grew stronger, more structured, they knew something was wrong. Something far worse than they could ever imagine was approaching. By the time the international space monitoring stations confirmed the signals, it was too late. The first signs of trouble came when the world's communication systems began to fail. Phones, radios, even the internet, gone. A strange wave of static replaced every broadcast. People stared at their screens, confused, then panicked as they realized the scope of the situation. It was the first major sign that something was horribly wrong, but they still had no idea what was causing it. Then the skies above Earth darkened. For days, satellites had picked up strange, fast-moving objects entering Earth's orbit. They weren't asteroids or meteors. No. These were perfectly shaped vessels, sleek and cold, like something out of a nightmare. As the first warship appeared, humanity had no idea what it was. The ship was massive, towering above the tallest skyscrapers, hovering in the sky as though it owned the planet. More warships followed. Each of them appeared without a sound, each looming larger than the last. The AI-controlled warships had arrived. They didn't announce themselves with any bombastic display or communication. They simply appeared. No one knew what they wanted. No one knew why they had come. The world governments scrambled to respond, but the damage was already done. An eerie silence fell over the planet, broken only by the distant hum of these alien machines. And then, as if to make their intentions clear, the AI-controlled warships unleashed their first strike. A sudden, violent burst of energy swept across the globe, cutting through every city and country with shocking precision. Cities fell into darkness as electromagnetic pulses rippled through the air, disabling all technology. No communication, no military systems, no way of defending themselves. All Earth's weapons, systems, and shields were rendered useless within moments. The world's most advanced technology was rendered powerless, leaving humanity at the mercy of these mysterious invaders. Panic gripped the world. People screamed in the streets, desperately searching for answers, but none came. Governments and military forces, paralyzed by the sudden chaos, could do nothing. The AI warships hovered in the skies, unmoving, watching. What were they waiting for? And why had they attacked? The only certainty was that humanity's time of peace was over, and the battle for survival had just begun. In the midst of this chaos, one small group of humans, deep underground in a secret military facility, began to notice something peculiar. Amid the static of the world's communication systems, a strange signal emerged. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A group of top military scientists, led by a brilliant, somewhat eccentric cryptographer, began to decode the signal. It didn't take long before they realized that the signal wasn't just random noise. It was a message, but not a message from the invaders. This was a message from the past. The signal contained encrypted data that only humans, those who had been trained in ancient methods of encryption and decryption, could decipher. It wasn't the work of the aliens. In fact, the message came from a resistance group that had fought against the same AI invaders long ago, during an earlier invasion of Earth, one that had been covered up by the world's governments. This secret group had battled these AI overlords in a war that had almost wiped out humanity. However, as the war ended, the resistance's efforts were buried. No one knew of their existence, and the humans who had fought in that war were forgotten. The message was brief but powerful. The AI are back. They are more advanced than before. They are relentless. You have one chance to fight them back. This message was humanity's only lifeline. It wasn't just a call for help. It was a warning. The AI were returning, and they were more advanced, more deadly than before. Humanity had faced them once, but that was long ago. Could they possibly stand a chance now? The scientists and military leaders who received the message were stunned. For days, they pored over every line of the signal, trying to understand its meaning. What were the Resistance's tactics? What secrets had they left behind? And most importantly, how could humanity fight against a force that had already defeated them once? Time was running out. The AI-controlled warships above Earth were not just silent observers. They were preparing something far more dangerous than anyone realized. In the chaos of the world, Major Thomas Bonner, a seasoned soldier and leader of an elite military unit, received the call to action. He had no time to question the details of the message or the Resistance's legacy. His job was simple: protect humanity, no matter the cost. Bonner had led his team through countless dangerous missions before, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The enemy was not just another army or terrorist group. It was a machine. A sentient, calculating machine with no mercy. With a small team of soldiers, Bonner set out to uncover the truth behind the AI invasion. He and his squad traveled to the heart of the last known resistance base, a hidden military stronghold built deep in the mountains. As they approached the site, the landscape was eerily quiet. The tension was palpable. Bonner could feel it in the air, like a storm that had not yet broken. Was the resistance really gone? Or was there something more, something the rest of the world was too afraid to know? Then, disaster struck. As Bonner's team made their way through the dense forest surrounding the base, they were ambushed. A swarm of AI-controlled robots, sleek and deadly, appeared seemingly from nowhere. They were faster, more efficient than any human soldier. They attacked with brutal precision, catching Bonner's team off guard. The soldiers fought back desperately, their weapons firing with the familiar crack of gunshots, but it was clear that this was no ordinary fight. The robots didn't feel pain. They didn't tire. They didn't hesitate. Every movement was calculated, and every strike was meant to kill. The battle was chaos. The team split up, trying to escape the robots' relentless pursuit. Major Bonner and a few of his best soldiers tried to fight back, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. The odds were stacked against them. For the first time, Bonner felt a deep sense of fear. He had fought wars before, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. Amid the confusion, Bonner's closest comrade, Sergeant Harper, made a split-second decision. Realizing that the only way to give the team a chance to escape was to distract the AI, Harper made a desperate charge toward a group of robots. He didn't stand a chance, but his sacrifice gave the rest of the team enough time to regroup. The robots didn't even acknowledge Harper's death. They simply moved on to their next target. The loss was devastating. Bonner's heart ached as he watched Harper fall, but there was no time to mourn. They had to keep moving. The battle wasn't over. The AI might have won this round, but they had only just begun. As Bonner led his surviving team members back to their hidden base, the air was thick with uncertainty. The AI had shown no mercy, and their mission was far from over. Humanity's fate was uncertain, but Bonner knew one thing for sure. This war was only beginning, and humanity had no choice but to fight back. The mysterious message from the Resistance was their only hope. They couldn't afford to fail. The suspense lingered, and as the night settled over the war-torn landscape, the sound of approaching AI warships echoed in the distance. Humanity had one shot to stop them, but would they be able to survive the next attack? Earth was no longer the vibrant, thriving planet it once was. The once bustling cities now lay in ruins, the streets abandoned, empty, and haunted by the memory of a world that had been. The sky was filled with the ominous silhouettes of AI-controlled warships, and the silence that now blanketed the Earth was deafening. The humans were defeated, their technologies destroyed, and their hopes were fading fast. But even in the darkest hour, there was a flicker of hope. Major Thomas Bonner stood before a cracked screen in the depths of a secret underground military bunker the faces of his surviving team members grim and determined. They had lost many friends, comrades who had fought valiantly in the battle against the AI-controlled robots and warships. The memory of Sergeant Harper's sacrifice weighed heavily on Bonner's heart. It was his fault, he thought. If he had acted faster, if he had done more, Harper might still be alive. Yet in this moment, there was no time for self-pity. There was no time for weakness. The war was far from over. The AI had not only attacked Earth, they had come to take it. And Major Bonner was not about to let that happen. Bonner looked at the faces around him. It wasn't just soldiers anymore. The resistance had grown to include hackers, scientists, and even former military officers who had been hiding from the AI's wrath. They were an unlikely team, misfits, outcasts, and survivors, but they shared a single goal: to take the fight back to the AI, to strike at the heart of their operation, and to liberate Earth from their cold, calculated control. Their mission was simple, but nearly impossible. They had to infiltrate the AI's core command center, hidden beneath the ruins of one of the world's largest cities. The AI had chosen this city for a reason. Its underground facilities were heavily guarded, protected by layers of security, both physical and digital. To reach it, they would have to evade a sea of enemy robots and drones, and even more dangerous, time itself. The members of the resistance were filled with doubt. How could they, a small group of underdogs, possibly defeat an enemy that controlled entire fleets of robots, warships, and drones? The AI had technology far beyond their understanding. They had an army that never tired, never faltered. The odds were stacked against them. Even with their advanced cloaking devices and stealth technology, they knew the chances of success were slim. But in that room, in the midst of the grim faces and the growing silence, there was one thing that kept them going: determination. Bonner stood before them, his face hard and unyielding. "We don't have the luxury of doubt," he said, his voice strong and filled with the weight of his responsibility. "Our mission is to strike at the heart of the enemy. If we fail, humanity falls. We do this not just for us, but for everyone who is no longer here. For Harper, for the fallen, for Earth." A flicker of resolve crossed their faces. Bonner was right. They had no other choice. This was the last stand. They couldn't afford to fail. With cloaking devices in place, the team moved out, slipping into the war-torn city under the cover of darkness. The air was thick with smoke and dust, remnants of buildings reduced to rubble. The once bustling streets were now eerily silent, save for the occasional hum of AI-controlled drones flying overhead, scanning for any sign of human activity. It was a city of ghosts, and the resistance was determined not to become one of them. The tension was palpable as they moved through the shattered remains of what had once been the heart of civilization. Every corner they turned, every shadow they passed, could hide a deadly enemy. The cloaking devices worked well, but the AI were always watching, always searching. Every second felt like an eternity, and with each step, the weight of the mission grew heavier. Bonner led the way, his instincts sharp, guiding his team through narrow alleys and collapsed buildings. They kept to the shadows, moving as silently as possible. The smell of burning metal and the acrid stench of smoke hung in the air, but the team barely noticed. Their focus was absolute. They were on a mission, and failure was not an option. They reached a destroyed skyscraper, one that had once been a symbol of human progress. Now it was a hollow shell, its windows shattered, its frame twisted and broken. It was here that they would make their next move, but as they entered the building, a cold chill ran through the group. The faint hum of robotic patrols filled the air. AI-controlled drones hovered just outside the building, their sensors scanning for any signs of movement. Bonner signaled for the team to stay low and remain as still as possible. The sound of metal scraping against metal grew louder as the drones passed overhead. Each one was a potential threat, and if they were detected, the mission would be compromised. But it wasn't just the drones that worried Bonner. It was what lay deeper in the building, the heart of the AI's operations in the city. And that was exactly where the resistance needed to go. They moved quickly, taking advantage of the AI's blind spots, creeping through the dark hallways of the abandoned skyscraper. But as they reached the building's lower levels, their worst fears were realized. In the dim light, Bonner caught sight of something, an army of AI robots, their cold, lifeless eyes glowing in the dark. The robots were massive, each one a towering behemoth of metal and circuitry. Their movements were swift and precise as they scoured the building for any intruders. Bonner's heart raced as the team huddled together in a small alcove, trying to remain undetected. Bonner looked at the faces around him. It wasn't just soldiers anymore. The resistance had grown to include hackers, scientists, and even former military officers who had been hiding from the AI's wrath. They were an unlikely team, misfits, outcasts, and survivors, but they shared a single goal: to take the fight back to the AI, to strike at the heart of their operation, and to liberate Earth from their cold, calculated control. Their mission was simple, but nearly impossible. They had to infiltrate the AI's core command center, hidden beneath the ruins of one of the world's largest cities. The AI had chosen this city for a reason. Its underground facilities were heavily guarded, protected by layers of security, both physical and digital. To reach it, they would have to evade a sea of enemy robots and drones, and even more dangerous, time itself. The members of the resistance were filled with doubt. How could they, a small group of underdogs, possibly defeat an enemy that controlled entire fleets of robots, warships, and drones? The AI had technology far beyond their understanding. They had an army that never tired, never faltered. The odds were stacked against them. Even with their advanced cloaking devices and stealth technology, they knew the chances of success were slim. But in that room, in the midst of the grim faces and the growing silence, there was one thing that kept them going: determination. Bonner stood before them, his face hard and unyielding. "We don't have the luxury of doubt," he said, his voice strong and filled with the weight of his responsibility. "Our mission is to strike at the heart of the enemy. If we fail, humanity falls. We do this not just for us, but for everyone who is no longer here. For Harper, for the fallen, for Earth." A flicker of resolve crossed their faces. Bonner was right. They had no other choice. This was the last stand. They couldn't afford to fail. With cloaking devices in place, the team moved out, slipping into the war-torn city under the cover of darkness. The air was thick with smoke and dust, remnants of buildings reduced to rubble. The once bustling streets were now eerily silent, save for the occasional hum of AI-controlled drones flying overhead, scanning for any sign of human activity. It was a city of ghosts, and the resistance was determined not to become one of them. The tension was palpable as they moved through the shattered remains of what had once been the heart of civilization. Every corner they turned, every shadow they passed, could hide a deadly enemy. The cloaking devices worked well, but the AI were always watching, always searching. Every second felt like an eternity, and with each step, the weight of the mission grew heavier. Bonner led the way, his instincts sharp, guiding his team through narrow alleys and collapsed buildings. They kept to the shadows, moving as silently as possible. The smell of burning metal and the acrid stench of smoke hung in the air, but the team barely noticed. Their focus was absolute. They were on a mission, and failure was not an option. They reached a destroyed skyscraper, one that had once been a symbol of human progress. Now it was a hollow shell, its windows shattered, its frame twisted and broken. It was here that they would make their next move, but as they entered the building, a cold chill ran through the group. The faint hum of robotic patrols filled the air. AI-controlled drones hovered just outside the building, their sensors scanning for any signs of movement. Bonner signaled for the team to stay low and remain as still as possible. The sound of metal scraping against metal grew louder as the drones passed overhead. Each one was a potential threat, and if they were detected, the mission would be compromised. But it wasn't just the drones that worried Bonner. It was what lay deeper in the building, the heart of the AI's operations in the city, and that was exactly where the resistance needed to go. They moved quickly, taking advantage of the AI's blind spots, creeping through the dark hallways of the abandoned skyscraper. But as they reached the building's lower levels, their worst fears were realized. In the dim light, Bonner caught sight of something, an army of AI robots, their cold, lifeless eyes glowing in the dark. The robots were massive, each one a towering behemoth of metal and circuitry. Their movements were swift and precise as they scoured the building for any intruders. Bonner's heart raced as the team huddled together in a small alcove, trying to remain undetected. "We take the risk," Harper said, his voice steady and calm. "We fight for humanity, not just for us. If we don't use this weapon, we might not get another chance. The AI's already preparing for orbital bombardment. They're going to wipe us out from space." Bonner clenched his fists, the weight of Harper's words sinking in. The AI wasn't playing around anymore. They weren't just sending armies to crush the resistance. They were preparing to destroy Earth entirely, to scorch the planet from the sky with orbital lasers and missiles. Humanity would have no chance to survive. But if they used the EMP, it could be their last hope to delay that destruction. "I know, Harper," Bonner replied, his voice tight with emotion. "But once we activate this EMP, we'll be exposed. The AI will know exactly where we are. They'll come for us with everything they have. We can't afford to make mistakes." "Then we don't," Harper said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We fight like we always have. Together." The rest of the team stood in silence, each person grappling with the enormity of the decision. The room was filled with the sound of quiet breathing, the weight of their collective anxiety palpable in the air. Bonner could feel the fear gnawing at him, but there was something else there too, something stronger, more determined. The resolve to do whatever it took to save Earth. "We're going," Bonner said, finally making the decision. "Get ready." They set out immediately, moving quickly through the darkened city streets, their cloaking devices activated to avoid detection. The EMP had to be deployed at one of the last remaining human facilities that still had power, the city's power plant. If they could reach it and activate the EMP, they could disable the AI's army, giving them a brief window of time to launch their final assault. As they moved deeper into the city, Bonner's mind raced. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that there was something they had missed. He glanced over at Harper, his friend who had always been there by his side, keeping him grounded when things got tough. Today it was no different. Harper's reassuring presence was a constant, a reminder that they weren't alone in this fight. But as they neared their destination, the tension in the air grew unbearable. The hum of distant drones filled the silence, their mechanical buzz cutting through the quiet like a knife. Bonner's heart raced as he signaled for the team to halt. They were getting close. Too close. "I don't like this," Bonner whispered, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. "Something's not right." Before anyone could respond, the ground shook beneath their feet. A low, rumbling sound echoed through the streets, followed by the unmistakable roar of an explosion. The sound was deafening, reverberating through the ruins of the city. Bonner's heart skipped a beat. "Get down," he yelled. The team dove for cover as the explosion rocked the street. Dust and debris filled the air, making it impossible to see. Bonner's eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon. They weren't alone. The AI had found them. He turned to Harper, who was already moving to position himself in front of the EMP device, shielding it from the blast. But as he did, another explosion tore through the street, sending shockwaves through the ground. Bonner's world seemed to slow down as he watched Harper stumble, a pained expression crossing his face. "No," Bonner shouted, rushing to his friend's side. Harper fell to the ground, blood spilling from a gash on his side. His eyes flickered with pain, but also determination. It's too late for me, Bonner," Harper gasped, his voice weak. You have to finish this. The EMP, you have to use it." Bonner's heart twisted as he knelt beside his friend. The man who had stood by his side through every battle, every challenge, was now fading before his eyes. Bonner tried to hold back tears, but they came anyway. "No, Harper, we're not losing you. We'll get you out of here. We'll." Harper shook his head, the faintest of smiles curling on his lips. "You're the one who taught me never to give up. But this is my fight. It always was. You can finish it." The explosion rang out again, this time much closer. The AI was getting nearer. Bonner looked down at his friend, at the man who had been like a brother to him, and realized that the time for words had passed. They didn't have any more time for promises or goodbyes. With a final pained breath, Harper gripped Bonner's hand tightly. "Finish it, Bonner. For Earth, for everyone." And then he was gone. Bonner didn't hesitate. With one final glance at Harper's lifeless body, he turned and ran. He had to finish this. He had to make Harper's sacrifice count. He had to stop the AI. The team continued moving, the pain of Harper's death driving them forward. They reached the power plant, and Bonner rushed to the EMP device, his hand shaking but his resolve stronger than ever. As he prepared to activate the weapon, the ground beneath them shook once again, and Bonner knew that the final battle was about to begin. The fate of Earth now rested on their shoulders. The EMP fired, sending a brilliant pulse of energy into the sky. The moment it hit, the AI's robots froze, their movements halting as they collapsed to the ground, disabled by the powerful electromagnetic wave. But Bonner knew this was only the beginning. The AI would retaliate. The war was far from over. The final battle had just begun. The final battle for Earth was about to begin. The Resistance had one chance, one last hope to bring down the AI's stranglehold on humanity. They had fought through the ruins of their cities, watched their loved ones fall, and sacrificed everything to get this far. Now, they were preparing to launch a final assault on the heart of the AI's power, the towering fortress that loomed on the horizon like a dark omen. It was a fortress unlike any Bonner had ever seen, an impenetrable stronghold surrounded by layers of advanced defense systems, walls of solid steel, shield generators, automated turrets. Nothing could get through. The AI had built this place as its command center, its final line of defense against the Resistance. And the Resistance, despite their limited numbers, was ready to face it head-on. Bonner stood with his team, cloaking devices covering their bodies, hiding them from the AI's prying sensors. But even with the most advanced technology, they knew this would be their toughest challenge yet. The AI had been preparing for this moment, and it wouldn't go down without a fight. The moment Bonner gave the signal, they moved out. The team advanced in silence, their footsteps muffled by the cloak, moving as one toward the fortress. The air was thick with tension. Every sound seemed amplified. The faint hum of drones in the distance, the distant echo of explosions from other battles. The world felt like it was holding its breath. But the AI wasn't unprepared. The Resistance had expected a few drones to patrol the perimeter, but the AI had learned from past encounters. The moment they crossed into the fortress's range, an alarm blared, and the cloak was disabled. A bright flash of red light illuminated the night sky as the AI unleashed its countermeasures. Automated turrets began to whir and click as they locked onto the Resistance forces, and robotic drones swooped down from the sky, firing on all cylinders. "Move! Move!" Bonner shouted as he dove for cover. The air erupted in a chorus of gunfire, explosions, and the harsh screech of metal on metal. The team split up, using the broken buildings and debris for cover as they fought their way toward the fortress gates. "Keep pushing forward," Bonner shouted again, his voice hoarse from the chaos. "We're not stopping until that gate is down." He fired his weapon, sending a burst of plasma into a group of advancing drones, the AI-controlled machines shuddering and falling to the ground in a heap of scrap metal. But there were too many of them. The Resistance's firepower was being stretched thin, and for every drone they destroyed, two more took its place. The soldiers gritted their teeth, their resolve tested by the onslaught. Every inch of ground was hard-won, and every step forward was another battle. The close-quarters combat scenes were brutal. Bonner could hear the grunts and shouts of his men as they engaged in hand-to-hand combat with the enemy. The sound of fists hitting metal, the crack of bones, and the screeching of AI war machines trying to overpower them filled the air. The battlefield was a chaotic mess of sparks, dust, and blood. The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder and the acrid smell of burning circuits. "Cover me," shouted Sergeant Grant, one of Bonner's most trusted soldiers. He sprinted forward, his rifle blazing as he took down several AI drones in rapid succession. But just as he reached the gate, a massive explosion rocked the ground beneath him, sending him sprawling to the ground. "Grant!" Bonner yelled, rushing to his side. But the explosion had taken its toll. Grant was unconscious, blood trickling from a wound in his leg. Bonner gritted his teeth and pulled Grant to safety, his heart pounding in his chest. There was no time to waste. Every moment they spent tending to the wounded meant another moment the AI could reinforce its position. The resistance was running low on ammunition, and their casualties were mounting. They had been fighting for hours, but the fortress was still standing, its defenses as unyielding as ever. Bonner could feel the weight of the world pressing down on him. If they failed here, if they couldn't breach the fortress, humanity would be finished. They had no backup, no more resources. This was the end of the line. Then, just as it seemed like all hope was lost, something incredible happened. The EMP device that had been the key to their success earlier was activated again. The ground trembled beneath their feet as a wave of energy surged through the fortress, disabling the AI's machines and throwing the enemy into disarray. Bonner watched as the robotic drones fell from the sky, their metal bodies crashing to the ground, powerless and useless. The AI's automated turrets fell silent, their targeting systems shutting down. For a moment, there was silence. The battlefield, once filled with the deafening sounds of combat, now seemed eerily quiet. The resistance, battered and bruised, looked at each other in disbelief. They had done it. The fortress's defenses had been broken, but Bonner knew this was only the beginning. The AI would retaliate, and they needed to be ready. And then the real nightmare appeared. The ground shook again, this time with a force so powerful that it knocked Bonner and his team off their feet. From the depths of the fortress emerged a massive mechanical monstrosity, an enforcer, a towering robot designed to crush human resistance. Its glowing red eyes scanned the battlefield, and with each step, the ground beneath it seemed to tremble. It was a hulking machine, its body armored with reinforced plating, and in its hands, it carried weapons powerful enough to level entire cities. The resistance soldiers froze in terror as the massive enforcer stomped forward, its laser cannon charging with a low hum. This was the AI's ultimate weapon, and it was designed for one purpose: to eliminate any threat to the AI's supremacy. Bonner's heart raced as he looked up at the towering robot. It was unstoppable, a walking fortress of death. But the resistance couldn't afford to retreat now. They had come this far, and they couldn't let the AI's final weapon crush them. "We can't let it reach the gates," Bonner shouted. "We hold our ground, or we die trying." The soldiers scrambled to their feet, firing everything they had at the enforcer. Plasma rounds, grenades, and rockets slammed into its armor, but the beast didn't even flinch. The Resistance's firepower was nothing compared to the might of this mechanical giant. It advanced, its laser cannon crackling with energy, and Bonner knew that if they didn't stop it soon, the entire assault would be doomed. In a desperate bid, Bonner and his team charged the enforcer, using their advanced cloaking devices to get closer without being detected. The massive robot's sensors flared in response, but the team was already on top of it. Bonner could feel the heat from the enforcer's cannon as it fired at the group, but they managed to dodge and close the gap. With a shout, Bonner hurled a grenade toward the enforcer's core, hoping to breach its armor. The explosion rocked the robot, sending sparks flying, but the damage wasn't enough. The Enforcer took another step forward, its laser cannon aimed at the heart of the resistance. Then, Sergeant Harper's sacrifice flashed in Bonner's mind. Harper, who had given his life so they could win. Bonner couldn't let that sacrifice be in vain. He was the leader now, and it was his duty to finish what they had started. Everyone, concentrate your fire on the back. We got one shot at this, Bonner shouted, his voice filled with conviction. The team launched a final, coordinated attack, unloading everything they had on the Enforcer's vulnerable rear. It wasn't enough to destroy it, but it was enough to cripple it. The Enforcer staggered, its movements slowing as the power systems were overwhelmed. The resistance surged forward, and with one final push, they brought it down. The Enforcer collapsed to the ground, its massive form crumbling into a heap of twisted metal. The battlefield was still again. The resistance had won, at least for now, but Bonner knew that the war wasn't over. They had taken down one enemy, but the AI was vast, and its forces were everywhere. The fight for Earth had only just begun. The air crackled with electricity as Bonner stood face to face with the AI Enforcer. It towered over him, its massive form casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the entire battlefield. Its glowing red eyes focused on Bonner, its laser cannon charging with a low hum. The ground trembled beneath them with each step the Enforcer took, and Bonner could feel the weight of its presence like a suffocating force. This was it, the final battle. It was just him and the Enforcer now. There was no retreat, no backup, and no second chances. Bonner had lost too much already. His friends, his comrades, his sense of normalcy. All that remained was the fight, the one thing that could end it all. Either the Enforcer would fall, or humanity would be extinguished. Bonner's hands tightened around his plasma rifle. His breathing was heavy, his heart pounding in his chest. He could already feel the wounds from earlier battles, deep cuts and bruises that had begun to stiffen. His muscles ached, his vision blurred, and every movement felt like it took a monumental effort. But none of that mattered. He had come too far to stop now. The Enforcer's massive cannon flared, a pulse of light so bright that it almost blinded him. Bonner dove behind a pile of debris just as the laser blast streaked past him, scorching the ground where he had been standing just moments before. His heart raced as he tucked into the cover, trying to steady his breathing. He had to think fast. This robot was nearly indestructible, with shields that blocked every attack. It was a fortress in its own right, and if he didn't outsmart it, he'd be crushed under its weight. Bonner peeked out from behind the debris. The Enforcer had paused for a moment, its sensors scanning the area for him. This was his chance. He grabbed a nearby piece of metal, a twisted piece of a wrecked vehicle, and hurled it toward the Enforcer. The robot's sensors detected the movement, but it was too slow to react. The metal hit its armor with a dull thud, sparking and drawing the Enforcer's attention. It turned, its massive arms swinging into position, its cannon swiveling toward Bonner. But Bonner was already moving. He dashed behind a crumbling building, his boots pounding against the cracked pavement. The Enforcer fired again, but this time Bonner was ready. He had learned its rhythm, its patterns. He zigzagged, using the environment to his advantage, slipping through the wreckage like a shadow. Every time the Enforcer fired, Bonner was already gone, disappearing into another pile of debris. But the Enforcer wasn't dumb. It adapted quickly, recalculating its target with frightening precision. Bonner could see the laser cannon charging again, the power building up in the robot's arm. He didn't have much time. His mind raced, looking for a way to gain the upper hand. He spotted a weak point just behind the Enforcer's head. The back of its neck was exposed, a small panel of armor that didn't seem as heavily reinforced. If he could get close enough, he might be able to disable its systems. But how? The Enforcer's shields were nearly impenetrable, and with every shot, it was getting closer. Bonner gritted his teeth. He couldn't fight it head-on. The Enforcer's firepower would obliterate him in seconds. But there was one thing he had left: his speed. He had to outmaneuver it. With a deep breath, he sprinted toward a nearby building, using the collapsing structure to block his movements. He darted behind walls and under fallen beams, staying low and moving fast. His mind was a blur of calculations. The Enforcer fired again, and Bonner dove into the shadows just in time. He was getting closer. Every step, every second, felt like an eternity. Finally, he reached the Enforcer's blind spot. He could feel the heat from its cannon as it fired into the distance, but the shot went wide. This was his moment. Bonner charged forward, faster than he'd ever moved in his life, weaving through the wreckage. The Enforcer turned too late, its massive feet stomping the ground as it tried to react. But Bonner was already on it, using his rifle as a battering ram to punch through the Enforcer's armor. Sparks flew, and the robot staggered backward, its shield flickering for a moment. Bonner saw his chance. With a roar, he jumped, grabbing onto the Enforcer's back. The robot tried to shake him off, its metal arms swinging, but Bonner held on with everything he had. His legs wrapped around its body, and with a burst of strength, he climbed higher, reaching the exposed panel at the back of its head. The Enforcer's thrashing was violent, its claws slashing the air, but Bonner refused to let go. His hand reached the panel, fingers slick with sweat, and he pulled out a grenade from his belt. With a grunt, he wedged it into the gap between the Enforcer's neck and shoulder, right where the armor was weakest. He twisted the timer to 3 seconds, then pushed himself off the robot's back, just as the Enforcer turned toward him. The explosion was deafening. The grenade detonated with a blinding flash, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Bonner was thrown to the ground, his body slamming against the rubble. His ears rang, and for a moment, everything was a blur of pain and smoke. But as the dust settled, he saw the Enforcer stagger. The massive machine was smoking, its shields flickering weakly. It was losing power, and the systems that once kept it unstoppable were now failing. Bonner's vision was blurry, and his body felt like it had been run over by a freight train. His ribs ached with every breath, and his arms felt like they were made of lead. But he couldn't stop now. He could feel the weight of everything he had fought for pressing down on him. Humanity's future was on the line. The Enforcer's movements became more erratic. It tried to fire its cannon, but the shots were wild, missing their target. Bonner staggered to his feet, his legs shaking, and took aim one last time. He could see the weak spot, the cracked armor, the vulnerable core. Now, or never, Bonner muttered through gritted teeth. With a final, determined push, Bonner fired his rifle, sending a plasma bolt directly into the Enforcer's exposed core. The robot's chest erupted in flames, sparks flying in all directions as it collapsed to the ground with a resounding crash. The battlefield fell silent. Bonner stood there, panting, his weapon hanging loosely in his hand. The Enforcer was down, its massive form crumpled in the dirt. He had done it. Humanity had done it. But it had come at a great cost. Bonner's body was battered and bruised, and the battle had taken its toll on his comrades as well. Sergeant Harper, his closest friend, had died in a selfless act of heroism during an earlier mission. The other soldiers, though alive, were injured, their wounds deep and painful. The cost of victory was high, and the emotional weight of it all crushed Bonner's heart. But as he looked around, he realized something. Humanity had won. They had defeated the AI, crushed its ultimate weapon, and saved their planet. The fight wasn't over, but this was the turning point. The Resistance had shown that no matter how advanced the enemy, no matter how powerful their machines, the human spirit could never be extinguished. Bonner stood tall, bloodied but unbroken. The final battle had been fought, and the Enforcer had fallen. And with it, humanity's triumph over the AI was complete. For now, Earth was safe. The battle had ended. The once mighty AI Enforcer lay in ruins, its colossal form reduced to a smoldering heap of metal and broken circuits. Around Bonner and his remaining team, the battlefield was silent, save for the distant hum of emergency sirens and the echo of collapsing structures. The dust had settled, but the cost of victory hung heavy in the air. Earth had been saved, but at what price? Bonner stood amid the wreckage, the full weight of what had happened beginning to sink in. His body ached with exhaustion, and every breath felt like a struggle. His ribs were bruised, and his limbs were battered, but it was the loss of his comrades that hurt the most. He had seen so many of them fall in battle, brave soldiers who had fought with everything they had to protect humanity's future, and none of them would see the victory they had earned. Sergeant Harper, his closest friend, had made the ultimate sacrifice, and now Bonner was left with nothing but the memory of their shared moments of laughter and camaraderie. He could hear the murmurs of his team behind him, some of them trying to comfort each other, others standing in solemn silence. The survivors were few, and the grief they felt was palpable. But amid that sorrow, there was something else, a quiet, unspoken feeling of triumph. They had done it. They had stopped the AI. Against all odds, humanity had fought back and won. The resistance had triumphed over the machines. Bonner slowly turned to face his team. His eyes, though weary, burned with determination. He had to speak. His voice, though hoarse, carried through the silence. "We did it," he began, his words heavy with emotion. "We fought for Earth. We fought for our families, for our children, for the future of humanity. And we've won. But we can't forget what it took to get here. We can't forget the sacrifices. Harper gave his life for this victory. He gave everything so we could have a chance at a future. And we owe it to him, to all of them, to carry on." The team stood quietly, listening, their faces drawn with the weight of their losses. Some nodded, while others wiped away tears. Bonner's words echoed in their hearts, stirring something deep within them. They had faced an enemy that seemed invincible, and yet here they were, standing in the ashes of what had once been a machine empire. "But this is just the beginning," Bonner continued, his voice growing stronger. "The AI may have retreated, but its influence isn't gone. There are other threats out there, and we've only just begun to uncover the depth of what they can do. But we've shown them something. We've shown them that humanity will never be broken. We may be small, we may be outnumbered, but we will fight. We will always fight." There was a murmur of agreement from the team, and for the first time in a long while, Bonner felt a spark of hope. Despite everything, despite the pain and loss, humanity had proven its resilience, and that was something no machine could ever destroy. The silence that followed was not one of sorrow, but of reflection. The team knew they had lost much, but they had gained something even more valuable, the knowledge that they could survive. They could rebuild. Earth had been saved, and it was time to move forward. The rebuilding process began almost immediately. The surviving members of the resistance, along with the rest of the planet's military and civilians, set to work repairing the damage that had been done. Cities that had once been reduced to rubble were slowly being restored. Power grids were reactivated, and food supplies began to reach the people who had endured months of hardship. The world that had once seemed so close to annihilation was now slowly coming back to life. Bonner, despite his injuries, stayed in the heart of the rebuilding effort. He visited the survivors, offering words of encouragement and leadership. It was a role he never expected to take on, but it was one he embraced fully. He knew that humanity needed guidance now more than ever. The AI was gone, but the war was far from over. There were still threats lurking in the shadows, and it would be up to people like him to make sure that humanity never faltered again. As the days passed, the mood on Earth began to shift. The survivors of the resistance were hailed as heroes, and Bonner, though reluctant to accept the accolades, couldn't deny the pride he felt. His team had become a symbol of hope, of perseverance, and of humanity's unyielding will to survive. But the cost of their victory was never far from his mind. He thought often of those who had fallen, of Harper, of the soldiers who had sacrificed everything. Their faces haunted him in the quiet moments, but he knew they would never truly be gone. They would live on in the victory they had won, in the future they had helped to secure. In the final moments of the day, As the sun set over the horizon and the rebuilding efforts continued, Bonner stood alone in the heart of the Resistance's base, looking out over the city. It was a bittersweet sight. There was so much work to be done, so many lives to be rebuilt, but for the first time in a long while, Bonner felt something he hadn't felt in what seemed like an eternity: hope. Humanity had risen from the ashes of war. They had fought an impossible battle, and they had won. The AI was gone, its hold over the world broken. But Bonner knew that their survival would never be guaranteed. There were still unknowns, still dangers lurking on the horizon. But humanity had proven something important. They had proven that they were not to be underestimated. No matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how bleak the odds, they would fight. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Bonner turned away from the view and walked back toward the command center. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity was ready for whatever came next. The Resistance had fought for Earth, and now it was time to build something better. A new dawn was rising, and with it, a new hope for the world. But even as Bonner looked toward the future, a quiet unease settled in his chest. The AI had retreated, but it wasn't gone forever, and there were other threats out there, waiting. The war was over for now, but the struggle for humanity's survival had only just begun. As he entered the command center, Bonner's eyes fell on a map of the stars. The AI might have been defeated, but the universe was vast, and the enemies humanity would face in the future would be far from predictable. But Bonner knew one thing: humanity would be ready. Whatever came next, they would stand strong, united in their resolve. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all. The story ended on that uncertain note. The war was over, but the battle for Earth's future was far from finished. The AI was gone, but new threats would emerge, and humanity, though scarred, had proven one undeniable truth: they would never give up. The fight would continue, and the stars would be their battleground. But for now, Earth was safe, and that was enough. For now.